funny one to start with and just to get your reaction. Okay. So braless and red-lipped, we enter into July. Hi, my name is Christa of Practical Astros, and I'm here with my partner in time, Mandi Rae of Ecstatic Astrology. I am Practical Astros all over the internet, and you can get in touch through my website. And I'll pass it over to Mandi.
I'm also Ecstatic Astrology on everything, generally speaking, and also braless. Entering July.
Cheers.
Okay, so we're going to go into it. Today is Wednesday, June 26th. It's 10:37 a.m. Central, 11:37 a.m. Eastern, and we are starting our recording with Virgo rising. And here is what July looks like. It's important to note that before we get to July 1st, we have Saturn turning retrograde, stationing retrograde rather, on the 29th. And that's in just 3 days from when we're recording this. So
he's slow. He's so slow right now.
And right on my moon, directly on it.
Apologies.
I know, right? Sorry about your moon. Stay tuned for the t-shirts because they're coming. So anyone with placements at around 19 degrees Pisces, and I give a couple of degrees on either side, should be feeling it in some way. I don't know if I'm necessarily, I'm feeling it, but I think more feeling the desire to get my stuff together, which I think is a good way to look at Saturn. You know, I know some people are like, Saturn can't be good, it's a malefic, but I hold the belief that it can be, and it's helping me, I think, organize my life a little more, especially at home. We're doing a lot of purging. So Saturn retrograde, what does a retrograde mean to you, Christa?
Hold on, I'm going to get this up here. A retrograde to me is like, depending on the planet, depends on how engaged I get in its retrograde. For Saturn retrograde, I'm like, dude, you retrograde like half the year. So It's just part of your nature. And when we think about planets that are so far out in comparison or relative to us, like that's just the nature of that relationship is slow. It's like a long distance relationship. Sometimes you're like really engaged and you're on the phone and you go on vacation together, or you go to where they live or they come to where you live. But then a lot of time of the year, they're just far away. You still maintain that relationship. Now with Mercury retrogrades, to me, it looks more like that weaving of between the worlds. So I'm more actively engaged with the Mercury retrograde. Saturn retrograde, Neptune. I'll put a pin in Pluto for right now, just for personal reasons. Uranus, those retrogrades are kind of like, that's just how that is a major pigment in the color that it produces is its retrogradeness. So for Saturn, I mean, I don't have it sitting right on my moon. I have had Saturn station on my IC and retrograde to my south node and station again before coming back. And I will tell you that sucks. So when it speaks to you, it's like when it has your literal number of degree and it's talking you directly, it's way more palpable. If it doesn't have that, I kind of feel like you can just kind of glide along and it just be part of the pigment that of color that you view it as. So I'll just say that. I don't want to talk about Pluto today.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely good with that right now. I like that though. And I've heard retrogrades described as more internal. I've heard them described as so many different ways. And I mean, I feel like constantly we're always redefining astrology anyway, because we're always experiencing new things, and especially for ourselves, not necessarily the fundamentals. But Saturn retrograde, it does feel a little bit like a break sometimes in my experience. So maybe there is a little bit of a break, and maybe that's because it's on my moon. But we're in the midst of that station right now as we're recording this. And then it says July 1st, Neptune retrograde. I will tell you it's technically July 2nd because it happens early in the morning. I just couldn't fit it all on that same block because there's so much happening as July begins. And
Yep.
Neptune retrograde is one, which is a good segue. It's in the same sign. It is a further out planet. I, and again, my own experience, have felt like Neptune retrogrades, if anything, it feels a little less like I can access my intuition as much. And maybe that's because I'm so Neptunian myself, but it feels more like, instead of feeling your intuition and getting a message, it feels more like, okay, I need this 8 ball to help me. Like, that's kind of how it feels.
Mm.
And I think maybe divination comes in more with Neptune retrograde, and we need a little more clarity. So that's, it deserves a little bit of a moment of focus, but honestly, not that long, because again, it retrogrades for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then,
When I looked at July 2nd, when I made my calendar, I try to put the sigils just over the number of like what's happening. And I was like, July 2nd just has too much going on. I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous. And it's because of that Neptune at that anaretic degree, and then Pluto at the 0 or 1 degree, for a good long while this summer. It's like, the the engagement of it connecting with Neptune, either for good or bad, and then connecting with Pluto for good or bad. It's like this. I'm reminded of, there's like two memes that I think of. It's like one woman, she's like, no, and then like, maybe. But then there's that Drake one where he's like maybe no, like maybe yes. It's like this, I'm not really sure. Like, that's what that, especially that hinge of the first and the second, really the 30th, the first and the second, feels like, is like the aspects happen really quickly with those two outers. And Saturn, Saturn is also there, just being in that Pisces house, but it feels a little whiplashy on like these outer energetic layers with those outer planets. So it's like dreams definitely have I had a dream this morning, for instance, where, in my waking life, I find dimes. It's like my signature that I find, that I immediately relate to my grandma Helen, because she left me a bag of silver dimes and she died. And so when I find a dime, I'm just like, kind of just like give a nod to Grandma Helen, who died 20 years ago. And I dreamt last night that I found a dime under my pillow. And in my dream, I was like, oh, she's even coming to me in my dream, because I have like an active dream practice. I woke up, there was a penny under my pillow. Right. So it's like these outer energetic layers of, I don't know why a penny was under my pillow. It was actually the guest room, because I couldn't sleep in my bed last night. So I like stomp hobbled to the guest room to like get a good night's sleep. And so somebody could have left it in there, but the fact that I dreamt about it and then had it come to form felt like those energetic layers happening around you, and it feels more present this summer, because they're all kind of in play.
And there's a lot of connections to Neptune and Saturn that are good. I mean, for instance, when Neptune is stationing to go retrograde, Mercury trines it in Cancer. And I didn't put that on there because I have Mercury moving into Leo, but there in the first and second, Mercury in Cancer is trining Neptune stationing, and that feels really potent. And it feels like what you just described, like dreams that come into form and synchronicities and things of that nature. And I love people who are tuned into synchronicities, because generally they know I am. And so I'll get lots of calls about it, or lots of texts, you won't believe what happened. And when I'm with someone who knows that, I mean, it's just one of these, like, they just constantly pop off, and, I know that we're, as humans, kind of programmed to see patterns, but there's some that just are too, that doesn't happen that way. I had a guy walk up to me with a crab at the moment of the solstice.
Right.
It's like, I was trying to tell
to do
people,
that, man.
Right. It was just like, and the crab had eggs as well. And it was just so Cancerian. And I'm a Cancer rising. And I was just like, no way. The people I was with are not really synchronistically minded like that. So I didn't at first tell them. I was just like experiencing this really cool synchronicity alone, like, whoa. And you want to tell someone so bad. So I tweeted it. But then I had to explain it to them later, and they were kind of like, okay, that is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think astrology, astrology primes us or trains us to look for patterns. I think that's why people come to astrology in a large part is there's comfort in patterns. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, my life might feel chaotic, but if I see my life in a cosmology that feels somewhat organized, then there's comfort in that. I'm not just spinning out of control. I mean,
Mm.
honestly, that's so much about what I feel like astrology can be good for. But in relation to coincidences or coincidences or synchronicities, it feels like, not to be all woo, but it feels like you're honing and developing a muscle that the more you recognize it, the more you're capable of seeing the real nuanced synchronicities. And and there seems to be like this defiance or this um, quote rational like defense of some people to not find comfort in synchronicities of like, well, that it's like the Neil deGrasse Tyson at the party. It's like, man, you're really smart, but you're just bumming us out trying to like
Yeah.
prove all this stuff. And if you practice like recognizing synchronicities, I just feel like it's this intuitive like antenna. Let's not call it a muscle, an antenna that you just constantly are dusting off to be able to receive more because there's patterns everywhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like you can get lost in the patterning, but if you stay, and I'm saying this out loud apparently for myself, if you stay curious and amazed at the patterning and the synchronicities, then that just brings you joy. I love that I get to have a dream about a dime because it reminds me of my grandmother that I was incredibly close to, and there's a penny under my pillow. I don't know how to explain it. There probably is some sort of explanation, but why did I have it? I don't know. I just get to enjoy that it happened, and I'll just put it in my back pocket of a nice little story that I will hold and remember my grandma all day long because I had that dream. So
Mm.
suck it, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Don't poop on my dreams.
It's very, yeah, you're very right about that. It's almost as if like there's a subset of people who want to make you feel guilty for doing what we naturally do
Yeah.
anyway. And, maybe if someone hadn't seen a spark smolder over and over again, we wouldn't have discovered fire, and paid attention to it. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to think about it that way too. I mean, pattern recognition helps us, so totally
Yeah.
agree. And there you go, July 1st, pattern recognition, synchronicities, because Mercury in Cancer trine, which is very supportive, Neptune, which I consider intuition. I think it's a really good keyword for Neptune,
What's the
and
moon?
Cancer.
Where's the moon on that day? So if the moon is in Cancer on Friday, then it might be, is it in Taurus, late degree Taurus at that point, or is it already in Gemini?
That is a good question. So let's see. We need I don't know what to do. Neptune retrograde. Get to it exactly. Yeah, there you
Nice.
go. And you can see there's Mercury 2950,
Woo.
Neptune stationing at 2955. They are
Mhm.
within 5 minutes of each other. And yeah, there's the sextile of the
The
moon
both.
in
Yeah.
Taurus. I love that. I do think that's
Yes.
wonderful. Um, Interesting to note as this happens, July 2nd, the sun squared the nodes, and I didn't even realize that the sun was at the bending.
Oh, yeah.
It is. So that has potential to be um a big start to the month, because the sun at the bendings is, for me, a stepping stone of the eclipses. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
look at it. It's like, okay, this is an important moment in the eclipse story.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the solar eclipse being April 8th. And then we have another pair in September and October coming up. So this is really the midpoint of the eclipse
Yeah.
cycle here. Um, and it's Cancer. The sun's at 11 degrees of Cancer. So Cancer versus Aries and Libra, it's just a very, very different thing. And it's important to pay attention to that area of your chart in relation to the eclipses and the new and full moons that are happening around this time. The full moons in Capricorn as well, two of them.
Yeah. 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 I mean, at least like Cancer can see the moon, it's got that support there. It can't see
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter. Even through Antisha, there's not that, but at least it can see the moon. So being at the bendings feels like it's held a little bit. Um, Mars is also there in Taurus, so approaching
Mhm.
Uranus. So it's not great, but it's away from it. It's separating from that.
There you go. Yeah, the moon's on its way away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is it's not July 1st, but July 2nd is when everything kind of pops off, I think. And it's worth noting that the moon will hit Uranus, which it does that every month. So we shouldn't, make a big huge deal about it, but Mars is their co-present as we begin this month, and Mars in Taurus, Mars doesn't necessarily feel totally comfortable in Taurus.
Mhm.
Although I think that happens to be good. If this were if this were going to happen in Aries, Mars,
Right.
Uranus, which it has before,
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
know. But yeah, so Mars in Taurus coming to Uranus, but July 2nd is a good day to kind of watch for themes as we get towards the Mars Uranus conjunction, because the moon will hit both that
Mhm.
July 1st date, and something to watch anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Venus, Venus is trying Saturn on July 2nd, which I find also very supportive. Saturn recently retrograde. Similar themes, I think,
Hmm.
all around, intuition, synchronicities, emotion. And Mercury moves into Leo. So I have a guy singing
Well, and
whenever
there's some like relationship there because Pisces, like Venus exalts on Pisces and
Mhm.
Saturn's there. And Saturn exalts in Venus's sign of Libra. So like there is some sort of like they may not be they might be second cousins in this of like they have enough to kind of get along. And like, water trines, there's I've already been plenty emotional enough because of my just health situation. And when you lose life force and you lose blood, you're like so frail, and it's just like the emotions come up a lot quicker. I think there's plenty in the sky right now that is also influencing that. But when I see a Venus Saturn trine, I'm like, a good cry might just be exactly what the
Mhm.
doctor ordered, and then you can like perform it when Mercury goes into Leo.
There you go. Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. I have seen we have a karaoke place close to us, and my friend loves to go. And I have seen some of the most emotional singing. People go, karaoke places are like, I don't know, this liminal space where people go either when they've just had a wedding, or when they're breaking up, or when they're quitting their job, and they
Yeah.
just go to the karaoke bar and get maybe a little drunk and then sing their hearts out. And
Yeah.
I've seen some of the most emotional. So it's funny you brought that up. Things like Purple Rain being performed by
Hmm.
a little blonde girl, and it's just like the best because
Yeah.
she is just letting
In
it
it.
all go. It's very Mercury Leo to me. Leo's playful, Leo is expressive, and Mercury moving there, people are going to be extra expressive, probably until the third, when I have someone hanging up the phone because Mercury opposes Pluto. It's like, I don't want to hear what you have to say, or I don't want to talk to you anymore. It's a very much take back your power with your communication, I feel like, on
Mhm.
the third with Pluto.
Yeah. So that, yeah, Mercury going to Pluto, that was one that I've spent some time just kind of contemplating on because, as we move into the summer and these planets go into um, Leo, making that opposition to Pluto, like the moon does it, we've had a little taste of that. But, Mercury in Leo is like a chatty Cathy, as we say in the US. It's like wants to speak and express itself. And being opposite Pluto, I mean, there is a tension point with oppositions. There's also this, defiance against each other. So
Mm.
that desire for transmutation of Pluto being very far away from maybe the best planet to deliver transmutation, Mercury kind of being able to go between worlds and go between people. But having that space, maybe it's great that Mercury is not conjunct Pluto because they would get into like really big trouble right now. Having that space, it's like they can think think bigger than themselves because both Mercury and Pluto are very small bodies,
Yeah.
but they can make pretty big changes. It's like I don't want to compare them to rodents or rats, but it's like the capacity for damage and life is pretty great, but they're very small. They're unassuming on their own. So together, it's like maybe it's good that they're kind of kept far away to get that perspective. I'm honestly looking forward to this one just to see how it expresses itself, being Mercury Leo. And this is angular in my chart. So it's like, what's to me, that's like it's Mercury day too. So it's like I always kind of pay attention to omens and synchronicities, but that day I'm like, big time. I'm gonna be like, what's that guy Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys with like the big goggles? Be like, what's happening? What's gonna happen today? You know?
I feel the same way. I get wrapped up in the maybe the no's from Pluto. I feel like Pluto can say no a lot, or make you realize you should say no sometimes. And so this one gave me vibes at first of like, kids wanting to play and be loud, and the large group of adults saying you need to be quiet. So it's given me that vibe a little bit, but with regard to Pluto and Aquarius is such a bird's eye view sign. So I think you're spot on. And like, what's coming through, because this is really, like you said, we've had the moon do it, but this is really the first blip of a personal planet, I suppose. Something bigger than the moon hitting that opposition.
And it bringing in the luminary of the sun and Saturn, because the sun ruling Leo and Saturn ruling Aquarius feels just really stark. And both the sun and Saturn have kind of a fatherly or patriarchal vibe to them. And so maybe this is like showing just the differences in how authority can provide a chasm of separation, or the difference in types of authority that we surrender our agency to. All this month, there's all these little things that feel like it's starting to be the systems of authority and what we give our agency to. There's like little fractures that feel like they're starting to show. And that's both vulnerable position for all of us to collectively be in, but it's like that necessary, that necessary breakdown so that something new can grow out of its shell. But that Mercury Pluto, because it's that Saturnine solar opposition by rulership, feels, again, it just feels like an omen rich. Like, what are the symbols? What are the dreams? What are the news stories that catch your attention that day? What's your own personal, family dramas that are happening, something going on at work? What sort of song you can't get out of your head? I don't know. It just feels archetypal that day. But particularly with the ideas of authority and how we and how we either speak truth to power. I know that that's a phrase people say, but when you think about what those words mean, it's very difficult to speak up and say, actually, I think that that's wrong. Even if you are my boss or my teacher or my parent or some sort of figure of authority, speaking clarity from having perspective to positions of power is a vulnerable thing, but it's also kind of like, that's really the only way. I mean, Mercury is the deliverer of messages to the people. Mercury is like our best bud for the people, and being able to express in that solar way of Leo to power, which feels scary. I just feel like I would pay attention to the omens, and I would activate that early degree Mercury Leo to, not just say fuck off to everybody, but when you really feel the call to speak up, do it even if it is scary, because that's like the first stage of like massive radical revolution that we all kind of constantly need to be mindful of, whether we're always being radical or not. I don't know. It just feels like a good day for it. Good day to start a revolution.
It does. And the moon, it should be noted, I was just looking at the chart, is exactly conjunct Jupiter when this happens in Gemini.
Boom. There you go.
So yeah, Mercury is making a point here, it feels like. And the fact that the sun, which is ruling Mercury, is in Cancer and Mercury is in Leo, I really like that. I think that's going to be an interesting day. And then, of course, the next day is 4th of July for Americans who are so excited about fireworks. And my daughter is
It's
flying.
also election day in the UK on the 4th
Oh,
of July.
is it? Okay, well, there you go. So it's
Yeah.
a big day. The moon will be in Gemini. There's not much to speak of other than what happened basically right before it with Mercury opposing Pluto. Yeah, the moon will be at late Gemini. Mars is 18, Mercury's 3. So I guess it's kind of interesting that Mars will be approaching a sextile to Saturn at that time.
Did you say your daughter's flying that day on the 4th?
She's flying on the 4th, and she's flying late. And I was like, you're going to get to see fireworks from the plane. And what's funny is she's got Mars at late Gemini, and the moon will be there. So I laugh at little things like that, and fireworks being also a very Mars Uranus thing, and Mars is approaching Uranus, I mean, it doesn't happen every 4th of July, but this 4th of July it is. So it's definitely has promise to be a trickstery 4th of July, I feel like, with the moon in late Gemini. We'll see. And then the new moon the next day. So that's at 14. Is that what I said? 14 Cancer. I bet it's at the very first. 1423 Cancer is where this new moon is. So, and that's another thing I was thinking about whenever I was looking at this. The new moon really is at a specific degree where it's not making any exact aspects. It's got about 4 or 5 degrees from everything that you would look at. So it's almost trine Saturn. Yes, we can. Thank you for saying that. You're like, Mandi.
I'm like,
show it.
Chart.
Okay, here's the exact moment of the new moon, 1423. And it's 5 degrees or 6 degrees, whatever, this 5 degrees away from trine Saturn. It is just a few degrees away from sextiling Mars. It is just a few degrees away from squaring the nodes. So there's like lots of little things that it's almost aspecting, but it's not quite. And it's really doing its own thing, at 14.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's like, what's the ascendant? So the ascendant's in Sag for Birmingham.
For Birmingham, yeah.
Yeah. So it being there in the 7th house, kind of like do the ability to just have that leisure and pleasure, not being bothered. That's kind of the vibe. It's like, it's not being bothered by the conversation of all the other planets. It's like, it just gets a nice, quiet new moon to itself. There was in the Mountain Astrologer, they will have like comics in the back, or like throughout the editions. And there's one, it's like what the different signs bring to a potluck. And my favorite one for Cancer was 2 bottles of her favorite red wine, but she left early because the party wasn't at her house. And I think of that of like Cancers really do, they're able, a lot of times heavy Cancer placements can just be best when they are alone and at home. And, having the sun and the moon there together, and that it's the 4 of Cups, right? No, it's the 3 of Cups. It's that beautiful just celebration card in tarot. And just to not be bothered by Saturn or Mars or, the nodes. It's like nobody's asking anything of them. They can just take it easy on that new moon. So take that as like your charging orders. Just like, don't be bothered, just. It's
so funny. I'm reading the Sabian symbol and you're hitting right on what the Sabian symbol is. And that's, I know, it's in a sumptuous dining hall. Guests relax after partaking of a huge banquet.
There you go.
And it says the need that exists in an early stage of human growth to materialize the concept of fulfillment. So it's basically the mind yearns to translate what it has seen in purely physical terms, a materialization of the spiritual. That feels very much like what you were describing. And you were hitting on something there, because that's exactly what Dane Rudyard thought about this degree.
Yeah.
So I do think that's going to be quite nice. I don't really I mean, Venus square Chiron depends on if you work with Chiron or not. I do. I don't see this as bad. I see this as a moment to, some emotional healing, especially from maybe eclipse time because Chiron was so heavily involved in eclipse.
For real. For
So,
real.
yeah. I mean, I think this is going to be a nice new moon and one that you can sit with your own things like emotional security, your own emotional comfort, your family, your any of those Cancerian things, and where you have Cancer in your chart. If that's the second house, it might be a money comfort thing for you.
Mhm.
If it's the 11th house, it might be, is my friend group still working out for me, but either way, it seems really something where it's contemplative and emotional, but not like, I mean, you may cry, but not like, emotional pain. It feels like, what do I need emotionally and how can I go forward from here in
And
that
Venus
way?
co-present too. And Venus and Jupiter have a slight antisha. It seemed like maybe the day before they share that antisha, that equal power. I've been working with antisha even more. And it's like meaning opposite shadows. So it's like there's an equal power of them. There's like kind of the secret sharing, and to have kind of Jupiter and Venus in that secret conjunction sort of aspect flanking that new moon. It's almost like they're at the door, not letting anybody bother the sun and moon in Cancer. Just give them a minute. Just give them a minute.
Oh, I love that so
And it's
much.
Friday, if you just it's a Friday afternoon. Yeah, banquet, personal banquet.
There you go. And right after the 4th, a lot of people will have it off, and it seems like it's going to be a long weekend. So, also a good time to go look at the Milky Way if you can, because it is bright and high in the sky because it is Sagittarius. That's where the Milky Way is brightest. So you can see that pretty well with the sun in Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. It's a good time to do that.
Nice.
All right, what's coming up next? Yeah, that weekend is just the moon will keep moving through Cancer and eventually enter Leo and join up with Mercury. And then on the 8th, Mercury and Jupiter are sextile, and Venus and Uranus are sextile. So they're both, I consider sextiles opportunistic, which is why I have the little 777 thing. Now, depending on what, the signs are, I like that Mercury and Leo and Jupiter and Gemini, that gives me more of those lyric vibes, writing, creativity. Venus and Cancer and Uranus and Taurus is more of it makes sense after the new moon, like emotional liberation to me. So, maybe if you are someone who is artistic, you will be creating something from that emotional reset you had at the new moon. That's what I'm getting though. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts
No,
on this one?
yeah, I mean, I love that sextile is opportunity. It's like the first aspect that they can make after being conjunct, then they're reverse and they're sextile. So it's like, what can we get into? And with especially the water and earth signs do like to kind of connect in that somatic way. The air and fire does feel like more like that creative spark. So I like that kind of marking off that day when Mercury and Jupiter are sextile of like, I'm a put it in your calendar so you are reminded to do it. Like carve out a couple of hours that day to just work on a creative spark, like why not? I feel like the Venus Uranus will just happen on its own, but the Mercury Jupiter feels like Jupiter brings opportunity. He doesn't just come up showing up with bags of gifts. He's like comes up with like a opportunity, and so carving out space to snatch it is a I don't know. It's like we don't always get these chances. So
Absolutely. I'm looking to
what was
see
it?
it.
Take your chances, change your dances from,
That's it. Yes, exactly. And the moon will be in Leo. I had to look just in case, but yeah, the moon will be in Leo as well. So
perfect.
it is perfect. Okay. And I'm switching back and forth, and so I keep getting confused. But I mean, I'm like that lady with the numbers, If you ever
Yeah.
ask me to do
Yep.
math and you see my face go, it's because I have to have paper and stuff. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you can see in Tisha And my brain, I'm like, but I need a chart or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's
Um,
I think of that meme, and then also the one from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Charlie with his like all of his like lines. I feel like they are in the same room where she's trying to figure out what he's saying, but he's got it figured out, you know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I'm glad we have that interplay because I'll try to do the simplest math on the fly and it just doesn't work. Maybe the Mercury sextile Jupiter will help me with that. I don't know. So yeah, the 10th, the Sun trine Saturn as well. So we've got these. I like that we have these Cancer Pisces trines. We have these Cancer Taurus sextiles going on while the Sun is in Cancer. I think the Sun trine Saturn, which is retrograde, just continues on some things we were talking about, for instance, from July 2nd, Venus trine Saturn, and the intuition, the synchronicities, the also, what do I need to redo? For instance, if you realize something, and I do like to, this whole month is a story, right? So the new moon, we have this banquet by yourself, where we're deciding on things, maybe emotional comfort, something like that. And then we get to Sun trine Saturn, and Saturn's like, okay, well, because you realize this about this Cancer area, maybe we can redo this here in the Pisces area. So for me, that's first and ninth house. And I haven't traveled a lot recently. I mean, a little bit, but not like my normal kind of traveling.
Right.
I go everywhere all the time. So Saturn in my ninth makes sense that I've kind of slowed down on it. But this may be a moment where I'm like, wait a minute, I need to get back to it a little bit, and I'm already thinking about planning a tour in October, and it's something I haven't done in a while. So I can see that reflected in my own chart at least. And I think if you look at where it's at in your chart, look at those houses, what are those for you? And is there anything that might come up and you say, maybe I need to actually bring this back? Maybe it's been gone for a while.
That's a good thing about retrogrades too, is that return, that remember, that readjust, realign, all the RE words. That it's not just a pain, it's not just inconvenient, it's not just a slow downness. It's like you get to like return to things, and especially in Pisces, because Pisces loves to remember. That's why I think Venus exalts there, because it's all about being nostalgic. And the reason why we love is because we remember, and Saturn being there, it's like that's the blessing of Saturn retrograde there. It's like we get to return to things that maybe we forgot that we still loved, so.
Absolutely.
And
it's
then,
go ahead.
I mean, is it on the 11th? So Venus goes into Leo, but right before that, it also trines Neptune.
Yes, Venus trines Neptune right before that. And that was another thing that it's like, how much do I put on this calendar? Because there's so much every time, because we know Neptune's at the end of Pisces. We know Saturn is at 19, give or take, depending on where it's gone to. But I think it just sits at 19 for a while. And Pluto's at 0. So anytime anything's about to move into Leo, we know it's going to trine Neptune and then immediately oppose Pluto. So we've got both of those going on. And so the 11th, right before. Yeah. So, wow, that's a double Pisces trine, really, now that I think about it. Let's look at the chart.
Dun,
Why
dun,
not?
dun.
All right, here we go. Here's the 11th. And let me go back a little bit. Hour. I need hour. Why am I not? Oh, that's it. See, I still learn. Okay. Here we go. There's the exact Venus, pretty exact Neptune trine. And at that moment, Sun, wow. Yeah, so that whole basically 2 days, I feel like the Sun hits 19 on the 10th.
So Sun trining Saturn and then Venus trining Neptune simultaneously.
Yep. And let me draw a little line because I can.
And that sextile to Uranus is also there because it's Uranus is going. When is Uranus going retrograde? I mean, I feel like it's slowed down, but it's at that 26 degree for a while.
Let's see, Uranus retro is September 1st. Okay.
Yep.
Wait, that can't be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is right.
Yep.
And it's at 27. Wow. Okay. And the reason I say wow is because it is moving slow. It's not going to get much further before it goes retrograde. And that to me, especially with Uranus being where it is in our solar system, I feel like it packs some punch, like punch that maybe Neptune and Pluto don't because they're so far out. But Uranus, when it stations retrograde, I feel like can be things slow down because Uranus is such a things happen with Uranus, so it's an interesting thing to me to see that it only moves like one more degree from these moments.
Well, and what was that? What was the chart we were looking at? I think maybe it was on the first or the second because the moon was at that degree.
Yes. Yep. It was the chart of,
Oh, was it Mercury, Apo, Pluto?
let's see, Mercury trine Neptune.
Mercury trine Neptune. So the moon was at 2758 because that was, yeah.
Oh, wait, you're telling me this, and this is actually totally relating to the 11th because Mercury and Venus were doing the same thing that the Sun and Venus will be doing on the 11th.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the relationship there is probably, I think,
Curiouser and curiouser.
yes, absolutely. And that makes me go, wait, where's the moon? The moon is trine Uranus on the 11th. Okay. Yeah.
Mars.
So
the moon is trine Mars.
yes, trine Mars. And then
tightly, yeah, but also trine Uranus.
Right there. So yeah, the 10th and 11th, I feel like are both because the sun hits 19 on the 10th and Venus actually hits 29 on the 10th later. So the whole of those 2 days, and those relate back to, I think, July 2nd as well. So July 2nd, July 10th, similar things happening.
Yeah.
I'm glad we dug into that because that's an interesting, and I think good. I mean, good in as much as right after this happens, and let me go back to it, Venus will oppose Pluto. So it's like, okay, Venus moves into Leo midday. Oh, that's going to be interesting. Some interesting lunch calls. Venus moves into Leo, and then it's moving pretty fast. So when does it hit the opposition with Pluto? 1/7. Okay, so
you're still on the
July
hour.
12th.
You're still on the hour.
Oh yeah. July 12th is the exact, right?
Oh, wow. That's pretty quick.
It was quick. Yeah, like I used hours because I was like, if I do a day, it might go past it.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
Yeah. So July 11th, Venus moves into Leo. The morning of July 12th, Venus opposes Pluto. But I mean, I always find the buildup to be like the degree right before the exact opposition.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, the exact opposition is July 12th, but Venus moves into Leo midday, July 11th. We can look at that whole, I think, time period as Venus opposite Pluto. And because Venus moves a little slower than Mercury, it may be a little more palpable than Mercury. Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of just like sexual tension. And it's like the possibility and the tension of what might become and like that buildup of those energies. That's almost just more palpable than like when you finally consummate that.
Yes.
It's like once it's exact, it's like, okay, well, it's literally only downhill from here. Like the buildup is so much more ephemeral and magical and timeless. And it's like time does really just kind of bob in a float tank on its own when you have that kind of tension. But once you connect, even through an opposition, it kind of punctures it a little bit and then it's lessened. So applying aspects always feel way more blown up than the aspect itself or a separating aspect. So
totally agree. And actually, I'm looking too at the evening of July 11th around 9 p.m. Central East. The moon moves into Libra and will trine Pluto, sextile Venus. I actually think that's helpful. Yeah, it's got to be helpful.
It better be helpful.
It's got to be. So, I mean, let's talk about, I guess, the Venus being love, what we desire, what we attract, creativity, in Leo being such a, I mean, like you said, romantic. It feels like sexual tension, probably even more so in these signs
Mm,
than other signs. And then you have Pluto in Aquarius, which is, I mean, it's kind of detached, right? It wants to detach,
hmm
perhaps for the good of humanity, detached from your desires, kind of a thing, you know? And Venus opposite that is really like, it's almost like chasing someone
mm,
or needing to stay away from what you want for the good of something else, um, or again, it could be that, you know, I want to do this creative thing, and maybe the way society is built is not allowing me to. There's lots of different ways you could look at this Venus Pluto opposition.
Well, and Venus is in Jupiter's bound and it's in Mars's decan in this one. So there's a lot of like go get 'em tiger energy from that Venus ruled by the sun. But then yeah, that detached retrograde in Mercury's bound Pluto of like just get off me. You know, it's like it's gonna make that Venus chase it even harder. Um yeah.
Absolutely. I've worked with a few clients with Venus Pluto oppositions, and it can be pretty obsessive. It really can be. And that's not to say everyone with Venus and Pluto, but I mean, if you work with that in your chart, you might find that there is a little bit of that. I want it because I can't have it,
Mhm.
or you know, I guess control, and not necessarily in the evil way, but I just want this person for myself, you know, to hold. Is what is the baby reindeer?
Oh, I have not seen that.
Oh
I'm
man, it's a thing.
So I'm looking, I always kind of think about this, but I don't know her chart. Frida Kahlo.
Mm.
She has, oh, it's a conjunction. She has Pluto, Venus conjunct in Gemini. I was like, she has some of that Pluto, Venus energy about her with her impossible obsession and relationship with her husband, that they were obviously fated. You know, they were fatefully bound, even if it felt destructive to her, but it
Mm.
was a conjunction. It wasn't an opposition.
Mm. And I think you can read them similarly. I do, yeah, the opposition tends to be more push pull and a little, I don't know, maybe they both. I think conjunctions and oppositions are more similar than different, because you're either next to someone or you're looking at them across the table, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So it's it's very much a, I need this, or do I want them to go away, you know, kind of an
Mm-hmm.
energy. And the
Yeah.
sextile to the moon in Libra, which is going to hit the south node, it's very relationship oriented to
Hmm.
me. That's kind of how I'm reading it anyway. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, and actually what I have is I'm too cool for this planet as my little memoji thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because Pluto in Aquarius is very much a got to be different, got to differentiate myself from the crowd. I need, and in fact, I want to transform this whole society. That's kind of a Pluto in Aquarius thing. And then Venus and Leo is so, um,
Bring it back to me.
yes. And so
Yeah.
it ends up being like, I'm too cool for you guys anyway, you know, kind of a thing.
Or
So
Venus
that's
is like, don't you love my new outfit? And Pluto's like, don't tell me what I love. I I don't love it just because you thought that I would.
exactly. I wonder also in the world stage and the theater, as it were,
Hmm.
what might come up with some of these Pluto and Leo people that are running the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how this month in particular might change a lot of that landscape. We'll see. Mm.
Well, and also we had that Venus retrograde in Leo last summer.
Yes.
So I'm curious, just like if we think of the sun and solar, we live in like a solar world, solar universe, literally. But like our popular world is, you know, Celebrity is a solar thing. We see it. And
Mm.
last year it was like the summer of Hollywood breakups, right? With that retrograde. And was that just, it feels like actually longer ago. That was
It
last year,
does.
wasn't
Was
it? I
it?
mean, now I'm second
Let me
guessing
look. I
myself.
got you.
And so, Venus being there, being forward the whole time. And I'm just curious, just on like a really mundane level, if there's like reconciliation, or if there's, like the news loves to talk about itself, like stars love to like perform about themselves. I'm wondering if there's
Mhm.
going to be kind of a um an expression of what that Venus retrograde was last year.
It
um
was last year, by the way. You were
okay,
correct.
it feels very long ago at this
July
point.
22nd
Yeah,
is when it started
yeah.
last year.
And so she's forward this time the whole time. So I think she's actually forward all year. I don't think she has the retrograde this year.
She doesn't. Thank
Um,
goodness.
but
But
I
you know what
also,
will? Mars will do it right there where Venus is hitting. So maybe it's
oh,
something to
right.
watch.
Yeah. Because Mars goes back into Cancer, right?
Yep. It starts at like 4 or 5, actually maybe 6 degrees of Leo. So
Okay.
that first 5 degrees of Leo, and actually, just when you said that, it made me think, oh, we need to kind of watch this then
Mm-hmm.
for the Mars retrograde in December, because it will be those degrees. And I like when something, yeah, it starts at 6 degrees of Leo.
Okay.
Um, when something visits degrees like that, and something important is happening later at those similar degrees,
Mm-hmm.
I always just like try to make a mental note, like, okay, Venus will be opposing Pluto at 1 degree of
Mm-hmm.
Leo Aquarius. So in December into January, when Mars is retrograding over that, there may be something that you noticed here in July that kind of, I don't know, repeats or pings or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? You and I will be together in real life on this day.
We sure will. Yes,
I
actually, I
just
was thinking
realized
about
that.
that. Yay!
So what's it reminded me of is like, have you ever done geocaching?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So that's what when something happens at a specific degree, it's almost like that planet is leaving a clue for the next geocacher to check in. And that kind of informs like, okay, well, that's what's been happening on this spot at this degree within this sign. And even though they might not be related necessarily, they're kind of it's a touch point in the universe that they kind of, leave a dollar or like some dinosaur toys or whatever it is in the geocache box. It's like this moment that they're just touching. And it does feel like that blends or synthesizes some of their energies together, just especially in a nativity, if you have something at those early degrees of Leo or Aquarius, or if you have it in Scorpio, Taurus, because
Yeah.
it's going to be a square there. Ask me how I
Yeah.
know.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And I mean, a whole generation, Pluto in Scorpio, I have Pluto at 0 Scorpio. So it's like there are the 83, 84 babies that are going to be getting this ping to their Pluto as well, with Venus in that opposition, with Mercury in the opposition, and then eventually with Mars, I guess, in the opposition. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a Pluto and Libra baby, so I kind of I feel the wind go by me, but I'm not going to get hit for
you're
that.
not. No, but you are. You got some Taurus stuff, don't you?
Right on my moon. I'm sorry about my moon right now.
I'm sorry about your moon too. Sorry about both of our moons. I'm glad we'll be together just commiserating over our moons. That's what will
What's
be
funny
good.
is like looking at July is like predominantly Cancer season. There is some Leo in there, but like just how heavy the moon days are for the July month. It's like, oh yeah, there's some pretty big ones. I mean, the sun going into Leo. I read this morning that July 22nd is Mary Magdalene's birthday, which feels very Leo to me. It's like the heart.
Yeah,
And so there's like these Mary Magdalene celebrations that happen on the July 22nd. I was
I
like,
didn't
that's
know that.
cool. But just the Neptune retrograde, those two sextiles, Mars Uranus conjunction on the 15th, like that, the moon days of July do feel, maybe I just got like moon on the brain because I'm in a lunar year, but it's like that. It just feels like setting the tone for each week. It's like what's happening the 15th, Mars and Uranus. I mean, it's like crapshoot, literally. We don't know what's going to happen. The positive delineation that I've been chewing on is like, okay, so we have Mars exiled in Taurus. So it's not able to perform with the tools that it's used to. It can't express itself in the ways that maybe it's designed to. It can be a little ornery in Taurus. It's like I have a tool belt, but like none of my tools are in it. So like, what am I going to do? And so a lack of, money makes you very creative. If you have too much money, you won't be creative. So like, there's a point of being exiled that I think just makes you resourceful. So Mars and Taurus, that alone, I feel like it's kind of an ornery but reluctantly resourceful and slowed down Mars, which sometimes can be beneficial as opposed to being in Aries, like you mentioned before. Uranus in there, it's been there since 2018 or so. We kind of know the story of Uranus and Taurus at this point. Grain shortages, release of the grain from the ships, or from the ports. There's like, I did some research where Nancy Pelosi went and like visited Taiwan, and like this female, being Venus, like went and broke through this kind of stalemate of China and Taiwan's relationship with the US. It like broke through and kind of started to put some fractures in it. So having Mars with Uranus there, it's like, well, maybe there's some positive breakthroughs that have to do with women because it's in Venus's temple. And currently in the United States, there's lots of attempts to control women. It's like the story of all women throughout time has been like having power over women. So having Mars needing to be resourceful, and Uranus like ready to just pop off at any point. Mars can be that martyr and that defender of wherever it's at, wherever it's fighting for. Mars likes to fight for something. And so Mars and Uranus and Taurus there, I just feel like is a chance for there to be some sort of breakthrough to defend and be empowered in the area of life of female like protection and fighting. And I mean, honestly, just to get rid of these laws that are attempting to really control the agency that women have of their own personage. And to me, it's like way long overdue. I feel like it might be a moment of a tension point that I hope will break through. And it might be messy because it's Mars and Taurus and Uranus anywhere. But that's what I'm hoping for. It's like the tension has already been here. It's already been building for a long time. But having that empowerment piece come in, that's what I'm really hoping for, because I feel like it's a long overdue, and that's usually like a messy Uranus transit is like a long overdue transit,
Absolutely, and adjustment is kind of like what I'm getting as well, and the moon being opposite by sign during that time in Scorpio, which is Scorpio is very Lilith to me. It's the dark feminine sometimes. So I can totally see which direction you're going with that. And, the sun being in Cancer square Chiron is another thing that was standing out to me. And Cancer being, the sign of nurturing and mother, and moon square Chiron being healing or the wounded healer. All of those things just kind of back up what you're talking about as a archetype, as perhaps a potential way this might come out. And I do think of things like commerce as well, and I mean, just what do people need, and are people getting what they need? There's so much in this particular chart of the moment that, the moon in Scorpio being, maybe disempowerment sometimes.
When do the Olympics start? Are the Olympics the next week?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see.
Because I'm looking at, okay, well, Venus is in Leo. Venus rules Taurus. The moon also rules Taurus by exaltation. There is a Venus Mars Antisha here. Just dropping that in there. There is some sort of connection between Venus and Mars outside of it being whole sign house square. There is Antisha. But
Mm.
so we have another week. I wonder if this will be Olympic related because Mercury in Leo also feels Olympic-y.
Oh,
You know?
definitely. The Leo games part of it.
Mhm.
That's so funny. Yeah, definitely. It and the way I think the way things are right now in general with climate can
Mm.
come up. And I mean, just like you said, even where I'm at is in a drought. There's so much with Taurus. Taurus really is one of those fundamental signs. It's an earth sign. It's fixed. It is our
The Earth.
comfort. It is the earth. It is like, I mean, anything can happen under the sun. And that's why I had the little earthquake thing, because
Mm.
Uranus is the shaking up of it. I always tell clients, and it's funny because I'm just like, I wouldn't go skydiving on this day, or I wouldn't
Mm.
like, don't. And I know that sounds a little fear mongery, but I do with Mars Uranus look at that as a maybe lay low, don't put yourself into any physical kind of situation if you can
Mhm.
help it. Um, Mars, being body survival, and Uranus being unexpected events.
And the moon opposite that
Yeah,
too, circumstances being maybe not as fortunate.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm just like, what I'm actually thinking, I'm like, what am I doing on that day? Because of that. But, the moon and Mercury, oh yeah, we'll be making a square later in the day. It's really, I mean, I hesitate to say, but it's an interesting day. This is going to
Mm.
be an interesting moment, and I don't exactly know what is going to happen, but I feel like it's going to be something probably significant. And again, maybe
Yeah.
not that day, maybe the day before, maybe the day after, but
Yeah, we're going to be traveling the day before.
yes, the day before looks much better though. I feel like, yeah, we're just not even gonna speak that into.
Yeah. The day before is great for traveling.
It's awesome, awesome. We're
See, there's literally nothing on your calendar. It's
nothing.
wide
See,
open.
of course. I mean, you're Scorpio rising. It's gonna be feeling yourself. That's what it is.
Yes.
You're
Mhm.
feeling yourself. Yeah. So earthquakes. It'll be really funny to see if there is actually an earthquake. I always wonder,
Mm.
like, is there
Mhm.
actually an earthquake?
Yeah, or
Um,
I'll take like a semi truck that is full of like squishmallows that wrecks and like there's squishmallows all over the highway. I'll take that.
the sun is in Cancer. It's very
Yeah.
squishmallow. There you
Mhm.
go. I'm liking it. I'm liking it.
An earthquake just at the squishmallow factory.
Oh man, have you seen there's a Florida sinkhole that's just happened? There's a huge sinkhole in Florida.
Where?
It's I can't exactly remember. I think it's like
Gulf or Central or South?
I want to say
Okay.
central Florida. I need to check where it's at. But the sinkhole thing also
Mm.
with this sign based square to Pluto. I know it's way not a square by any means, but it's sign based, and
Mm-hmm.
Pluto seems such sinkhole vibes to me.
Mm-hmm.
Bridges have been a thing. Did you see the Wyoming bridge into
Yeah.
Idaho collapse? The dam in Minnesota? Like, I'm looking at all these things, and infrastructure keeps coming up. And what we do have is, yes, Mars, Uranus, like that's going to happen the 15th, but Saturn also comes through, and there's a lot building up to the sextile of Saturn and Uranus. I
Hmm.
think, are they going to sextile before they move into different signs? I think they do, right? Now I got to look.
They should. Yeah.
April of next year.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's the crazy time. We need a whole video on like this one day in next year. Anyway,
Oh,
um,
great. Looking forward to that one.
I know.
That should
Yep.
just be a live stream, just
Mhm.
like GoPros and just like walking around and just documenting all that's happening.
Yeah, because Mercury, Venus are retrograde with Saturn and the eclipse. Right. And Saturn's sextile Uranus. Anyway, we look forward to April of 2025. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming, which is all of the infrastructure. I feel like that could be a theme this month, specifically with the sextiles and trines to Saturn
Hmm.
and Uranus. And there's planets connecting the two just by going in between those sextiles and trines. So
And
yeah,
just
something to watch for.
and when you talk about infrastructure, like we think of, okay, bridges and buildings and sidewalks and
Mhm.
all this, but also just personal infrastructure. I mean, what I have noticed already is like the brainstorms of how I engage with other astrologers mostly, because that's my world, and the relationships and the infrastructure of, well, okay, in my personal story, one of my, I like to have my little catchphrases because they're easy. They're like pop modern mantras. And for me, it's a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's
Mm.
how I operate with astrology is I want it to be accessible to people, and I want to support other people in the work that they're doing. If I think they're doing good work, I just want to shout it out on behalf of them. I want to like relay the echo of what they're doing so that more people hear it. I want to amplify their radio signal so that it gets to a new community. And just the infrastructure of me working with other astrologers is starting to grow and grow and grow, because I feel like that kind of infrastructure, that sort of network, that sort of mycelium is what anchors us in a really long-term sustainable way. That's very Uranus and Taurus coded, for sustainable growth that becomes that once it grows, it kind of grows on itself, and you don't have to always tend to it. You can just plant the seeds and nurture it, and it be. We talked about this before, but those the reciprocal, the circles of reciprocity that
Mm.
also looks like that image. It's the earthquake, but it's also the pebble that starts to reverberate across the whole pond,
Oh,
and
yes.
reach shores that maybe you didn't even know that you could reach with this sort of breakthrough action. So just on a mundane personal level, working on personal infrastructure of like, what is the Taurus house for you? For me, it's seventh house. It's one-on-one relationships. It's working with other, and and so I just, it doesn't all have to be like crazy squishmallow earthquake. It can also just be like spoken to you on a more personal way. Now, if you have, I think it's at the degree of alcohol, so there is that.
26. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it kind of amplifies like what's the true story about what it means to empower females, and the story of Algol, and how there was like betrayal against her,
Mm.
and that vengeance of wanting to have the truth come out. So I mean, like it's double edged. It's again multivalent. It's nuanced. It's a multidimensional gem. It's not all bad. It has the potential of being surprising because of that Uranus.
Yes, yes. And it's like grab your surfboard and ride the waves rather than resisting, because we have, I mean, things that happen every day of our lives that are surprising. So it's like, don't expect something bad surprising. It's just be ready for whatever is the shift or the change or the freedom, chains break whenever Mars and Uranus conjoin. So
Mm-hmm. And we have August to go through this year. So like this day is not that bad.
in fact, like when I was looking, like I remember like going, "Oh, that's a Mars Uranus conjunction." It doesn't really, like, it did not compare to August is, and in terms of like the overall yearly
Mm-hmm.
stuff, I was like, "That's gonna be." It's brief. It's kind of a breeze. Not that
Yeah.
but Venus will be in Leo,
Mm-hmm.
and the Sun in Cancer, and it's like, and it's not really square. Venus is not square to it. So I just feel like there's potential for heart opening and care and love through whatever's going on. So yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree. And then the 18th, we have the Sun sextile Uranus. And I like to again see the story arc of these aspects coming in. And it's
Mm.
like, okay, Mars shook something up, or Uranus did, one of the two. And then the Sun in Cancer is like, well, hey, that crack in the ground that just happened with the earthquake, we can put some seeds in there,
Mm-hmm.
something of that nature. That's kind of the vibe I was getting
Yeah.
on the 18th. And sextiles are opportunity. So it's sometimes the opportunity doesn't come without the surprising shift or the change that you don't expect. And a
Yeah.
lot of times it can feel really jarring in the moment. And then you go, wait a minute, a few days later, I didn't even think about it this way. Well, this is going to free this up. And now I can do this instead of that thing I was stuck in And maybe it's like, oh, I had a job and the job is like, actually, we don't need you anymore. And you were going to count on that $2,000 check. But then now your time is freed up and you've been really wanting to start a podcast or something of that nature. And that's this middle week of July feels like, whatever changes happen on the 18th, a few days later, there is an opportunity in it,
Yeah. Yeah. And even like hearkening back to that new moon on the 5th, it's happening 12 degrees before it. But, I like lunar magic as like little glimpses or little glimmers of what will come to form. And so I even wonder, like, the journaling that you should do, and I will say that word you should do on the 5th, revert back to it on the 18th and see if they're tied in at all. Just with the sun and Cancer, which is the moon's temple, and Uranus and Taurus, and Taurus exaltation rulers the moon, it kind of brings in that moon. And so just to, again, like we like patterns, and your own personal pattern, you would only be able to see what that similarity is. But yeah, I like that sextile, and I like the image of like a little weed being planted in the sidewalk crack,
Yeah. Yeah. And then right after that, Mars moves into Trickster Gemini. And then, all of that will be immediately an idea of the past almost, because once Mars moves into Gemini, things go really fast. Mars will be in a better situation for itself. I have Cocopelli as the emoji. And Cocopelli, for anyone watching who doesn't know, Cocopelli is it's Native Indigenous American in nature. Hopi used it. And Cocopelli is a trickster god or goddess, depending on what you're reading, but played music, carried stuff on his or her back, whatever it is. I mean, I think it really is genderless, honestly, because there's a myth with Cocopelli that it would steal all of the daughters and redistribute them, which I found really interesting, especially with all of the female issues coming up in America, especially. And then Mars moving into Gemini, still has the trickster energy with it, and the musical energy with Cocopelli. Always had a flute, so it was just giving me heavy Cocopelli vibes with Mars moving into Gemini. What is this trickster energy going to bring about? Mars moving into Gemini is going to be people definitely speaking their minds. It's going to eventually meet up with Jupiter, and that's going to be extra trickster, so there's lots of this ability to kind of trickster for the greater good, I think, with Mars and Gemini, even though Mars is a malefic. I mean, it could be argued that it's pretty malefic to steal people's daughters and redistribute them.
You think? Yeah.
So, I mean, in one way, I feel like it's going to be a fight the power kind of a situation with Mars and Gemini. And in another way, Mars and Gemini is the power you're fighting. So it's like one of those things.
Well, and trine Pluto there too.
Immediately, like just right there, because is Pluto at the 0 degree? I don't know. Let's look. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. I feel like I need a sound effect whenever I bring up the chart.
Oh, I'll have Morgan as our video editor. I'll have him put something in there.
I love it.
Like that's the Awooga car horn.
Awooga. Exactly. And I think Pluto is at 0, just barely. So it is immediate. Let's see. There we go. Right there. Mars and Gemini. July 20th. 4:04 p.m. Give or take a few minutes. And I'm looking at other things, just kind of getting a lay of the land, because the sun will be trine Neptune from Cancer. Oh, the moon's even applying to a trine with Uranus. Lots of blue aspect lines here, which is really good. I think the thing that sticks out the most, now that I look at it, is Mercury square Uranus. And this is, okay, might as well leave the chart up, because this is the day before the full moon. And when I put the full moon on the calendar, it's like full moon in Capricorn. There's like so much going on during the full moon that I couldn't list everything. and here we are looking at it. First, you have Mars trine Pluto during the full moon. You have Mercury squaring Uranus. You have the sun trining Neptune and the moon in Capricorn sextiling Neptune. There was something else too. What was Jupiter doing? Oh, Venus is sextile Jupiter.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I feel like it's pretty auspicious, actually. I think the only thing you might call not auspicious is Mercury square Uranus. I mean, at the most. But
Mhm.
let's look at the exact full moon because it's really not that far past from when Gemini moves in. So that's the full moon in Capricorn, July 21st. Second one, and I found another thing interesting when I was looking at these. There was a full moon in Capricorn at, what was it, 1 degree, 2 degrees?
Yeah.
1 degree of Capricorn. That was when the sun was setting. And this full moon will be when the sun's rising, which I found really interesting and poignant in some way, that the first full moon of this cycle, when there's 2 in Capricorn, one of them is exact while it's setting, while the sun's setting, and one's exact while the sun's rising. So
what's funny is that you sent a video of being on the beach and like you see the moon and then you pan over, you see the sun, and no, it's not at all the same. But I was like, she's exactly like Luke in Star Wars, that like is watching those 2 luminaries rise. That's what it reminded me of. It's like she's like on Tatooine right now.
I knew it too. I was so excited, and I've done it once before. I went on a field trip with my daughter's class to Dauphin Island in the Gulf, and I knew that just because you're an astrologer, you get to know, like, okay, well, if it's happening, obviously the full moon is going to be when the sun sets, so you can see either the full moon rise or the full moon setting, depending on if it's a sunrise or sunset full moon. And I made all these kids get up. I offered them, I was like, do you guys want to get up and see this cool thing? Because it's really cool. And I was shocked. It was like 10 or 12 kids, me marching out to the beach at sunrise. And they got up, and this is a perfect time to do this. If you're anywhere you can see the sun rise and the moon set on July 21st, it's just a beautiful happening. You do feel like you're a little bit, because you don't get to see the sun and the moon be full at the same time unless they're right there on the horizon. So it's really neat.
Yeah, I'll have to make a trek up to one of the balds up on the parkway, because I'm thankfully surrounded by trees. So I get to see sunrise and moonrise and sunset and moonset very rarely from my house. I get the little I sing that Bob Dylan song, "Don't the Moon Look Good, Mama, Shining Through the Trees," because that's really the only way I get to see it. But I'll make a moment to maybe do an early sunrise trip up to the parkway on that day. I did that once before. There was a comet that came through. Maybe it was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think that was Neowise, right?
And I drove up. I like left at like 3 a.m. because when you're way up, way up for the East Coast is not that high elevation, but when you're way up on the Parkway, Mount Mitchell is the highest point of the East Coast. So I was like driving to Mount Mitchell to catch the comet at sunrise, and it was too cloudy because the clouds come in. But I saw this beautiful sunrise, and then when I left at like 5:30 in the morning, because the sun had already risen. I was driving by myself, had my thermos of coffee and music, and was kind of going down the parkway, and a mountain lion crossed over the road, and I like slammed on my brakes, and he like looked at me, and I was like, I've seen bears a lot, and I'm always surprised. I'm like, his ears look just like a bear's. Like, it's like comical because they look like a cartoon. And when I saw the mountain lion, I was like, his ears are just like a mountain lion's ears. And I like looked right in his eyes, and he just padded across the road and went under the mayapple like canopy, because it's like 2 feet high up on the parkway, and just vanished. And I saw his tail just like slip in, and I didn't see the comet, but I saw that cougar. And on like to have it to be during Leo season or whatever, it's like that magical time of that sunrise like I'm drawn to do it again. I know I won't have that repeat, but just being up there to witness the luminaries at that really potent time is just like, to me, it's like you get those coincidences, having the Leo sigil of a mountain lion while the sun is in, at least for me, the sun was in Leo then.
Absolutely. I'm adding the descendant here just to see, because I feel like,
It's like, is
because the
it?
sunrise, so the sun might set, hold on, let me see here. I know what I did. The sun might set, the moon might set right before sunrise on this specific one. But I'm about to see. Let's see. There we go. Oh, okay. There we go. So no,
It's a glimmer.
it is the sunset. The moon sets. I can't get over it. Moon set. I don't say moon set very often. I think that's why. But the moon sets. There we go. Yep. No, it is. That's exactly right at sunrise. Wow, that is so cool. That's going to look so neat. Yeah. I wanted to be sure because the ascendant and descendant right there. That's so cool. And we could wax poetic on this all day, because I think one of the better things, or the thing that teaches me about astrology more than anything, is visualizing it in the actual night sky, or day sky, depending on what you're looking at. Because this is technically when day starts. And this also gives a really good visualization of the 12th house. And the 12th house being where the sun rises, it kind of seems counterintuitive until you get on a horizon and you see the sun so bright in your eyes that you cannot see anything. It is just right there, blinding you. And that's kind of what the 12th house feels like. You can't really see. It's lack of clarity. And it's also when most people are just waking up, and the dreams are still right there. And because I've been asked that question, why does the 12th house represent confusion? It's where the sun rises. You would think it's when and it's like, just go stand on the horizon when the sun is in your face first thing in the morning, and it's giant, and it's
the Hubble style to the coffee maker. It's like, you haven't had your coffee yet.
Exactly. And that's why. So visualizing a full moon at a moon set like this when it's sunrise is one of the best things that will teach you about a full moon, or something like that. You're just like, wow, that's it. The sun and the moon are exactly opposite. And you don't get to see that oftentimes.
Well, so with that, will we be able to see Jupiter in that morning sky? Or it won't be outshone. So. But what about Venus? Venus is like 13 degrees away. So is it still occluded, or can we start to see it?
I think, okay, so let's see, because I want to say right before, wait, that's day. Go back, Mandi. I need hour. It has to be 15 degrees away. So right here. I wonder if, I think it's still going to be a little bit, I bet it won't be easily seen, is what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Be a couple more days.
Yeah. I'm looking at in the morning sky, because the sun is already well up. That's the thing. So I think actually more at sunset is when you're going to be able to see Venus, right?
Well, yeah. Is the sun moving faster than Venus? I don't know the speeds as well.
I know. I'm really bad at it too.
I'm sure somebody is screaming at the screen right now.
Yeah. Please leave a comment. Leave several comments and a like. Because there's so much with astrology. You're going to have your thing where you're like, my brain is like, my eyes twitching because there's so much.
But you're right. Yeah. Looking up in the sky to have that relationship, it's like, this is just a picture of the sky, right? And so it's having experience with it, of being able to, watching the sunrise itself or witnessing the moon when it's visible, that those two actions alone are such good ways to integrate astrology into your daily mundane life,
Exactly. So here is the actual visualization of the sky whenever it's happening. So yes, you'll be able to see Jupiter and Mars just before sunrise. And then, Venus is going to be a sunset thing.
Okay.
So when sun sets, there you go. The sun goes below the horizon. And Venus, yeah, it's going to take, I want to say it needs a couple more degrees before you can see Venus set. And I wonder when Mercury is at maximum elongation as well, because Mercury is difficult to see in the night sky or in the sky at all. And it has to be a certain like max elongation on the horizon. Gemini Brett is a great person to follow for this. I've taken astronomy for astrologers with Gemini Brett. And it's one of the things that once you grasp it, you start to almost grasp astrology better, but it's still difficult. Astronomers are insanely intelligent because you have to think about 5 different planes. You're like thinking about the ecliptic, and then, it's just insane. So it's definitely worth it if you are an astrology enthusiast to take some astronomy courses and get a hold of actually what ancient people saw when they were coming up with astrology, why they thought that, and why, Mercury is so elusive. It's a trickster planet because it is so elusive, and it does these things that didn't make sense to the ancients. It looks like it's moving backwards, it's moving forwards, and sometimes you can't see it, and sometimes you can, and it's the trickster. So,
it's also moving. There's an astronomy club here where I live. It's run through the college, and you can sign up. They do reserve spots, and they will take you up to their observatory once a month, and you can use their big ass telescopes and seeing Saturn's rings for the first time, like as an adult, after like kind of proudly walking into my astrology clothes. I'd seen Saturn's rings before when I was just kind of astro curious, but fully as an astrologer, putting my eyes to these huge telescopes and seeing Saturn's rings was like a spiritual awakening. I mean, just seeing it, I'm like, it's right there. Like you can totally see it, and it's moving. I mean, I love being able to see Venus. And yeah, you're right. Mercury is totally the trickster. But even, I mean, I've had like spiritual breakthroughs, just like bearing witness to the sun. I mean, the sun is like so magical, and of course the moon, but being able to see all the planets that you can with the naked eye, I just feel like it's a way to relate. As above so below means it means more than just what's happening up there is happening down here. It's like how do we actively integrate the astronomy of it in practice.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's also something that helps you. I think, someone said I was born at this time with this moon and sun sign. And I was like, oh, you were born on a full moon in the middle of the day. And they were like, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, it's one of those things that once you learn it, it becomes second nature. And it's really kind of a life hack too. It's pretty cool. So
it's also like the quality. It's like we talk about the quality of light. And, I have a 7th house sun. Like, what does that mean? It's like the sun was about to set. The moment that I was born, it was about to set. And so it's that twilight. It's like people coming home from work and like taking their shoes off and being comfortable and engaging and like, cracking open a beer or like just relaxing. And like, it's like the quality of light when I was born is that it's like the time of leisure, the night is approaching. My son, his son is in the 2nd house. It was like, it was hours before sunrise. Like it was like that you could not see twilight yet. It's like the quality of light for him is very different from the quality of light for me. So just visualizing the house that the sun is in, you can like just imagine that type of time of day. And also on your birthday for your solar return, looking outside during that time to get a sense, especially if you live in roughly the same latitude as your birth city, but just getting that sense of time of what the quality of the environment is, you can kind of get a taste of the mood of your chart just for that alone.
Yeah. For instance, if you go see this full moon set, and you will see the actual trine between the moon and Mars because it's 120 degrees. And seeing that in the sky is also really, really neat. It's like, wow, that's the actual trine between it. It's over here. The moon's setting over here, and Jupiter as well. Oh, so yeah, Saturn, you'll even see the almost sextile between the moon and Saturn. You'll be able to see most of, or a lot of the planets up above you. So that's going to be a really potent time to study that. And it being the second full moon in Capricorn, the anaretic degree, 29 degrees, woo, anaretic, the degree of crisis, that's what they call it. It's like, I mean, what is the crisis? Sometimes the crisis is more about, am I fully integrating the rest of what I learned in this sign, I think is what the 29th degree is for me. And it's super interesting. I hate to use that word. There was this movie where the dad wouldn't let his kids use the word interesting. And I was like, because it's just
curious.
It's curious. There you go. Because there's, first of all, three, I guess, at the anaretic. Neptune, the moon, and the sun. Then you have two planets at 26, and that's going to be Mercury and Uranus, and they're square. And then you have two planets at 0 degrees, Mars and Pluto. It's just like, wow, what a weird chart, because not only that, but Pluto is going to retrograde back into Capricorn. And it's almost like this full moon is like,
oh, right.
Here we go. We're about to have Pluto come back, and it's shining a light on it. They're conjoined technically. I mean, that is less than a degree away from each other. They're just conjoined out of sign. So,
and I'm always reminded, like, this will be someone's birth chart. Like, can you imagine like having this signature? Like when you say interesting or curious, I'm like, it's notable.
Notable.
Like if that's your birth chart, it's like it's like anchored in. I am imagining like the inside of like a complicated Swiss clock. Like all these pieces are very tightly synergized together.
Yes.
And the sun at the 29th degree, the sun is about to move into its domicile. The moon is about to move out of its exile. So like it's like this crisis of like, let's just get it over with. Sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think about too the coming astrology of August and such, and how this moment does seem to, like you said, get it over with, and we'll deal with it next month. Like get it over with. And it's, I'm not getting a get it over with. It's almost like get it done. Put your seal on it, stamp it, and send it. It's like,
wrap it up.
Send it.
Yeah, wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'll wait for the letter to come back in August and hear about all the news about my decision, but this is my decision. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, because they're in cardinal signs. Like they want to make that turn. They want to go forward. They don't want to go back and forth, or like sit on it. They want to like make the decision to move. Even if you have to kind of come back to it. But yeah, make the decision to move.
Yeah. Mars trine Pluto is very powerful signature. I think Mars being action and Pluto being transformation. That's almost like there's the wax seal, and maybe the letter inside of the envelope. Mercury square Uranus is I just wanted to tell you, I figured out I am going to take over the company. I'll still take over. Yeah. So lots of power, and it's like auspicious power is what I'm getting from it. Venus sextile Jupiter. There's benefic energy in very personal signs, Leo and Gemini. So it does almost seem a little self-concerned as well in that way, with Venus and Jupiter being like, hey, we got to look out for our heart, our thoughts, our communication, our whatever. Sun in Cancer, also very personal. I think the only maybe non-personal part of it is going to be the the Capricorn Pluto stuff. And that to me is like, I'm bringing the personal into the public, into the greater good, or something, or the structure of humanity. Like, here's what we're doing, or congressman, I'm whatever, but it's very much a personal energy into the outer world.
Well, and also what's getting my attention is like how many of them are operating through the bounds or terms of Mercury or Saturn. Pluto's in Mercury's bound. Mars is in Mercury's bound. Venus.
Saturn.
I think Venus is she in Saturn's bound there? Yeah.
And Sun. Venus and Sun are both in Saturn's bound. That's interesting.
Yeah. The moon is in Mars's bound. Uranus is in Mars's bound. I mean, it's just like just looking at like what are the tools that they're able to kind of participate with. It's mercurial and it's Saturnine. It's can I share my screen and show
Absolutely.
Show this card, because this was one that we talked about earlier. This card, the tarot of the moon, has these two concrete pillars on either side of it. And that's what the image of this card kept coming up with the two Capricorn full moons that we have this summer. So the first one we had at 1 degree, and then the second one we have at the 29th degree, just feel like a Saturnine container for the experience of Cancer mostly, but the entire Cancer period is kind of flanked with these Capricorn moons. And just like this is a 100+ year old card, but it just felt so apropos for this cycle. I think we talked last month. It gets on your nerves when there's like a lunation that's off track, like having like a Taurus new moon and a Sagittarius full moon. It's like, it's like kind of clanky. The fact that we have two is like getting us back on track. It's having that container. And just this card alone, it's like all the action and activity that's happening between these two, that first one that we've already had, and then the second one that's happening at the end of the month. I don't know. It's like, this is July. This is just like like you mentioned, the duality of these two dogs feeling very Gemini. The sun image of, Leo, and then the moon there also kind of displaying the yods or the flecks of energy that come down, but then also having just the connection, the pathway to the primordial waters. We've got a little crustacean Scorpio nod here. I don't know. I just like, this is the image that is burned into my mind for both of these lunations, but this second Capricorn full moon feels like this other anchor or tower or boundary or whatever that creates the container for the month itself.
It's such a great depiction of July. It's, wow. And even the sun's rays kind of raining down as the sun's in Leo, which is what this full moon heralds, is the sun moving into Leo, like you said. So it's like, okay, here we go. And Leo time is going to be really interesting this year. So,
yep.
Clearly, look at this picture. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I do like all the nods to everything on that card. That's even the Scorpio thing. It's like, is that a crayfish? Is it a Scorpio? Does it matter? No,
yeah,
sure doesn't.
I mean, I did pull the Scorpio card for today. So
you did. That's right. I love that you pull cards for this stuff, because it helps direct so much. It helps to, at least me, I pull animal cards sometimes, and it will just direct you exactly where you need to go.
Yeah.
So good practice. So yeah, that was the full moon, which if you have any cardinal placements, and I think that kind of doesn't even need to be said, considering the eclipses are in cardinal signs. It's like, if you have cardinal placements in this year's been a thing for you, you know what I mean? So, and this July as well. But I do think both of these full moons felt good. I
Yeah.
really think they do. As much as is going on with, like, Mars conjunct Uranus, and the oppositions to Pluto, these full moons have felt like, even if it's like, for instance, something medical that comes up, at least it's like, oh, I'm getting an answer or something like that, So,
Yeah, I mean, that's like the excuse me, the benefit of a full moon is it's an illumination of something that has already been there. So now you get, whether you like it or not, you're getting the full light shown upon it. So you get to see all the cards that you're playing with.
that's right. And speaking of full light, the sun moving into Leo the next day, and it's like me, 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 me. But then, of course, immediately you gotta look in the mirror because the sun opposes Pluto. And like, I can circle all of the time something is opposed Pluto here, which has been a few already.
But this one feels big.
This one does feel big. Sun in its favorite place to be, its home, opposing Pluto in Saturn's domain.
And we didn't have this last year, correct?
No, not in Aquarius, I don't believe.
No, I don't think so. I think it had moved back into Capricorn,
Mm-hmm.
because Pluto didn't make it didn't make as much progress into Aquarius last year as it did this year. So I think this is our first Sun Pluto opposition.
Mm-hmm. I can double check that really quick.
And is there a debate? Is there a political debate on that day? It's not that day, right?
Wait a minute. When is it?
There's one this week, but I feel like there's another one. I almost think it's that day. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah,
That would be funny.
that would be insanely funny. By the way, you're correct. It was last year it was 29 degrees. So actually, speaking of that full moon that we're having, this coming full moon in Capricorn is going to highlight the Sun Pluto opposition, square the nodes last year.
It is not. It's only happening June 27th and September 10th. For some reason, I had in my head that there was a debate that day. So
interesting.
maybe I'm foretelling the future and there will be something political that happens that day, because that's what it feels like to me.
Yes, it absolutely does. But just knowing the charts of the people involved, I mean, there's lots of fixed signs in yeah, in fact, fixed sign and cardinal and mutable. I mean, they have all three. So it's like, wow, it's like there's major things hitting on all of those modes of signs. So this one, though, being fixed, being the sun in its home sign, being Pluto at the 0 degree of Aquarius, just seems like an exclamation point a little bit.
Well, and similar, like we just said about how full moons, it's a full moon because it's opposite the sun. So it has the best chance to reflect back on all of the light available to it. If you look at just planetary oppositions, they're kind of doing the same thing. They're able to see each other from, maybe it's from the farthest distance that they can, but that distance does provide a full satellite to be able to reflect each other's light that they cast to each other. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that. And Pluto has such a, I don't know if you get this a lot, but to me, it has such tower card energy that when you have the sun in its, I mean, bestest, brightest place it can be, opposing that kind of dark tower card, especially in Aquarius, which is society. I look at Aquarius as like, this is like everything, right? The connection of all of us, and the sun burning so brightly opposing that. And it's almost like you get the fire just gets hotter. I don't know if it's like reflecting that fire back, and it's very, very tense. I get tense from this, which I don't like. For instance, Mercury opposite Pluto, Venus opposite Pluto, tense, but like not like this. Seems like
it's navigable. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, like fanning the flames, and then, I mean, you're coming on the heels of Mars Uranus as well. and there likely will be some, I don't know, rebellion, revolution associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people say Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. I don't know that I disagree with that. I think it kind of makes a lot of sense if you were going to look at modern rulerships.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's almost like you're bringing that Uranian energy in as well with the sun opposition to Pluto.
Yeah.
And they're square by sign to Uranus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's odd that I pulled that Six of Cups, the Scorpio energy, because it's like the one fixed sign that's not rearing its head
Mm-hmm.
really at all for this month. It's just quietly soaking in its tar pits of vengeance, waiting
Mm-hmm.
to come up later in the year. Um, when I think of Pluto in Tarot, Mars does come up, but it's almost like Pluto is so ephemeral in so many ways. I think of the continuation of the Tower card, and then what comes after the Tower is the Star card, and the Star is what rules Aquarius in Tarot. And I kind of think of that space between the Tower and the Star. To me, that feels like where Pluto sits, not in any particular card, but the transition from those two, because you only have the Star because you've had the destruction and the falling of the Tower, right?
Oh, I love it.
And so having the Sun reflecting that process of the Tower to the Star, to me, it feels like an illumination or a showing of power dynamics. Again, kind of reverting back to how do we give how do we give our own agency to authority? Do we really want to continue to do that in that same way? How can we kind of harness and pull energy back towards us collectively? I think Venus or Mercury in Leo still for a couple more days. I feel like it's an empowerment of the people, and that Sun opposite Pluto does feel like kind of an amplification or full illumination of what does that actually mean, because Leo Aquarius does feel like hierarchy or royalty, and then the common person, the common man, it feels
For
like
sure.
that dynamic.
Yeah, and I looked it up. The 23rd happens to be, and you're not going to believe this, and maybe you will, International Yada 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 Day.
Of course, that sure.
Apparently, I don't know, there's also a Seinfeld episode attached. You substitute it for blah, blah, blah. It's okay to make it a binge watch too, it says. But
Yep.
for some reason, I thought, that might be the best way to deal with this day. It's just yada, yada, yada. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's also peanut butter and chocolate day. So I like
Oh,
it.
that's every day for me, man. The best combo ever. Or like half the spoon of Nutella and half the spoon of peanut butter.
Oh man. Oh, I'm such a big fan of any of that. Nut butters in general. So I mean, peanut butter and chocolate. Maybe I don't know which one is the peanut butter, which one's the chocolate, the Leo or Aquarius, but
I would say that Pluto is probably the chocolate and the Sun is probably peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
Yeah.
I like it. So make sure and have say yada 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 while you're eating your PB and chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I had to bring a little levity. I was like, oh man, this is like what? And then I was like, well, I wonder what holidays. Is there any weird holidays? Yada 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 day.
Yeah, yeah. I know a ton of people whose birthdays that day, so I'm going to be asking their permission to look at their solar return, because that's just an interesting day.
Yeah, my dad's the 22nd. So, yeah.
Where's the moon on that day? So it's in Aquarius. Yeah. Is it in the middle of Aquarius at that point?
Look here. Do I have it exact? I do. It's 25. It's square Uranus.
Yada, yada, yada.
Let's just look. It's square Uranus there. Almost exactly is a degree away. So
it's right on my IC. That's great.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh man. Mercury is definitely still square Uranus, even though it's a degree away, it's separating.
That's on my MC, just past my MC. So I'll have something to say that week for sure. And I actually think I'm recording like 4 videos that week with other astrologers. So that makes sense. I'll be very, very expressive that week.
Can't wait. It's going to be such an interesting day. And then right after, and I have a big caution. You probably saw before I shared this, Mercury moves
Goes into Virgo.
into Virgo. And I have a caution sign for a reason. And that's because it doesn't get very far into Virgo before it goes retrograde.
Yep.
And this is when, in my humble opinion, things start going off the rails. There's August 4th, just as a preview to August. That's when Mercury goes retrograde. So it's not
we should record August before that date.
We're gonna have to. I think that's a great idea because I don't like to be that astrologer that's like, oh no, but mutable squares, I have them in my chart, are not easy. They are potentially the most existentially confusing of any of the signs to me. And they also happen to be in cadent houses. So I'm just watching all this mutable stuff come in. And I mean, every astrologer comes from their own chart. So you're never going to get any astrologer to divorce themselves from their chart. Just, I think people think that can happen and it cannot happen.
Yeah. There's something in your chart that would show that you have that delusion if you think that can happen.
Exactly. So like where I come from my neck of the woods, mutable signs and mutable squares are like, oh, here we go. So that's kind of how I look at it. And as we get closer to the sun and everything moving in Virgo, the fact that we have Mercury kicking everything off is like, okay. So yeah, Mercury moves into Virgo, pay attention because the moment that happens, I kind of want to talk to you about something. I kind of want to talk to you about shadow, about Mercury shadow. And I do think you cannot not give credence to the fact that it's going to retrace these degrees. I read some things about the shadow not being a real thing and it being about declination. And I understand that. But I also think, how can it not be? It's archetypal.
Yeah.
It's about the fact that and it's like there's Saturn's shadow. All of them have a shadow. And that shadow is they've already transited those degrees. They're going to retransit those degrees 3 times. I mean,
well, yeah, it's like looking at the geocaching example. It's like you're going back. So it's like whether it's like an astronomical thing that happens, the archetypal thing, I think shadow is a perfect word for it. I know other astrologers will disagree in it because they are, and I think there's space for people to have their opinions. I use that word because I don't use it as like a doom harbinger. I don't be like, oh, the shadow, the cloud is coming over and it's going to affect this way. But it's like it's a foreshadowing of those degrees that you're kind of slow. It's slowing down. So it's like when you slow down, I'm reminded of like if you're driving in a car and like all of a sudden you drive through a storm, you like turn the radio off and you focus. You go slower. It's like you kind of hone your attention skills to pay attention to what's happening. And to me, that feels like Mercury shadow.
Absolutely.
You're going to be way more mindful of where you're at. You're going to pay attention to those degrees because there is something that is making you slow down to pay attention to those degrees because there will be a return to it,
And speaking of, the shadow is at 21 Leo. Whoops. Look at how fast it's going right there. July 16th into the 17th is when the shadow starts. And then on the 26th, it moves into Virgo.
And goes to 4.
And it goes all the way to 4. So from 21 Leo to 4 Virgo is what we're looking at.
That's a long shadow.
It is because the August 4th is when it hits 4. So yeah, it is a long shadow. And I do feel like it makes sense to pay attention to the fact that it's going to transit these degrees. Like, for instance, if you have anything around 21 Leo or 21 of any of the fixed signs, it's going to station there. And the same for 4 degrees of Virgo or any of the mutable signs. And I think this one, and of course, we had the last Mercury retrograde was in Gemini, right?
Mm-hmm.
This one again starts in its own domicile. Like it is the ruler of Virgo, and it's going to retrograde there, and that also
Mm-hmm.
has significance for me. So to include both a fixed and a mutable sign in this is, you want to talk about a wide shadow. It's also
Mm.
like a wide retrograde in that way. And the same with Mars later when it goes from fixed to cardinal. I mean, you are bringing in a lot of different people. Whereas if it was only in Virgo, you're okay, you got cadent. I mean, mutable signs in your
Or
chart,
and Earth.
probably.
Yeah, yeah.
And Earth, yeah. But like when you're bringing in fixed Earth, fixed fire, mutable Earth, and then you're triggering a lot of different people in reality, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense, or it reflects that a lot of people are undergoing some change or some redo, rethink, reorganize, with it being Mercury and Virgo.
Mm-hmm.
It seems significant to me. So I said all that to say it's not a right or a wrong thing to look at the shadow. It is a depending on what you want to do thing is really what it is. And I think
Well, especially like if you have a fixed rising or a mutable rising, that's 2/3 of us.
mm-hmm,
It's like the cardinal risings have like the bendings going on already. So,
mm-hmm,
like it's a because it crosses over that fixity and that fire and that mutability and that earth.
mm-hmm,
It's also oppositional to Saturn. It's bringing in, the energies of the sun and the energies of Venus. At the same time, it does feel like that's setting the stage. That's the primer for August. Is
mm-hmm,
this?
mm-hmm.
And then like Mars is there, sextile,
Square.
sextile the sun.
Oh, sextile the sun.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Um,
Mercury will be squaring it by sign immediately
right.
in its
Right.
other sign.
Right.
It rules.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like it's Mercury's ruling Gemini and Virgo and going retrograde in Virgo.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, the that's so interesting to me because of the difference in Gemini and Virgo being so detail oriented, and Gemini being like, just give me all the knowledge and all the communication, and what's going to win. I kind of wonder, is the organization and the perfection and the service to humanity and all of those Virgoan concepts going to win out over the trickster, all of this AI communication, internet, like what? Not that it's one has to win, but I do think of it like that. What's going to win
Mm-hmm.
out during this retrograde, for all of us?
We just went and saw Inside Out 2 yesterday. And there's this point. So there's all these new emotions that are capable of touching the control panel of the main character, and anxiety kind of takes over. And there's a point in the movie where anxiety is very thoughtful. Like anxiety thinks of all sorts of scenarios, and really fast, and has plans, and like starts to then take over the control panel and move very, very fast to the point where it's whipping itself around. So it's like visualized by the color orange, because that's what the color of anxiety in the movie. And it's whipping around the control panel, and the character Joy, the emotion Joy, comes in and like looks at anxiety, and anxiety is out of control, right? It's like the anxiety algorithm has taken over the control panel, and even the most pure emotion of joy can't even go in and convince, and anxiety can't extract herself from the control panel either. And to me, that's what this feels like. It's like, don't let the anxiety square of Gemini Virgo just become a life form, or what's the a thought form. Let that kind of go out of control. Like anchor it as much as you can. I mean, the moon is trining Virgo, Mercury there, so like anchor, anchor, anchor.
Mm.
Anything to kind of like really kind of root you down, so that you don't just become untethered through
Yes.
the mercurial way, because it feels like it will hit real hard in that vata intelligent sense.
It
Yeah.
absolutely does. I completely agree. And, looming on the horizon is Mercury Jupiter conjunction. And I mean, the day, so the only thing else I had on the calendar was, so the 25th, Mercury into Virgo. And was I right about that, or is it actually the 26th?
The Mars Jupiter conjunction. You said Mercury, right? It's Mars Jupiter.
Mercury, yes, but Mercury and Virgo. I'm wondering if I have it on the right. Let's see. Mercury 25th. Okay, I was wondering if I had Mercury moving in on the 25th or 26th. It is the 25th.
Okay.
Because on the 26th, Chiron goes retrograde, which if you work with Chiron, that's something to note. And then there's really nothing else big the rest of July, like that I could really see makes any sense, you know? So it's like, there's nothing that sticks out to me. We're kind of sitting with that until August. We're sitting with Mercury and Virgo slowing down, and Mars slowly getting closer and closer to Jupiter.
Yeah.
And yeah, as we get into, so July 31st, they're within 7 degrees of each other. And that's July 30th and 31st, the moon transits them. So
it's funny when you said that, the song, the Peter and the Wolf song, started to come in my head of like, that's Mars and Gemini creeping up to Jupiter there.
yes, exactly. It feels like that. And that's the end of the month, or like the whole end of the month is just like that. So
anticipation.
Oh man. And then, you know, August as a
spoiler.
Just a preview. Yeah, August is like, man, I think it really kicks off with the new moon and Mercury retrograde, August 4th. And Venus will be co-present, and there's a new moon. So, I mean, I really feel like comparatively, July is not like,
it's got a lot going on. I mean, it does have a lot going on, but it's like, to me, it's interesting, notable, curious, you know, all those, that kind of vein. I should go to thesaurus.com and get some new ones for that. But that's really kind of like, it's manageable. There's some beneficial things. There's some illumination. It's like illumination of our situation. August feels like, okay, well, now we know what's kind of going on. And it's like the rubber meets the road dealing with it. So,
yeah. Yeah. So one last look at this this calendar here, with the good trines and sextiles too. We have a couple of those nice ones. What would you give, Christa, as the most cautionary or date or two here?
I guess the one that just gets my attention is the 15th, Mars Uranus, because you know, I have Uranus in the first house. And so I am just familiar with things that happen upon you, and you kind of just have to just go with it. And it's not very predictable. You know, as an astrologer, I like to look at things, you know, past is prologue. So I look at past things to see what's ahead. And with Uranus, it's just really hard to do, because it's just hard to assume that you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So one thing I like the full moon on the 21st. I'm going to be paying attention with, you know, Venus opposite Pluto, but the Mars conjunct Uranus is the one that really does kind of grab me by the throat the most.
Yeah.
But I also am like, but it could also be really wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like I've said this before, but Patrick Watson, astrologer, said Uranus transits can feel malefic in the moment, but benefic in the long run. And I'm just like holding on to that with the Mars Uranus thing. I'm just hoping for an empowerment moment where it does little permanent destruction, but it will do some destruction.
I think I agree with your assessment. I do. I do look at, I'm side-eyeing Mercury and Virgo, but I'm definitely agreeing with that assessment. And I think probably my most favorite day is going to be the 8th. I really like the two sextiles there. But otherwise, I think even though a lot's happening, it does seem like kind of a little bit of a calm before the storm, or maybe like a batten down the hatches before Mars, Jupiter, before that square to Saturn and all of that. So I do feel like overall it's it's got potential to be a great month, and with, a side of chaos.
Yeah. Just sprinkled in.
Oh yeah, the 23rd was also National Sprinkle Day.
Was it? Yada, yada, yada. I'm going to
Yada,
say
yada,
that.
yada. Oh, well, we made it. We had a lot to say about July, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I looked at it by making the calendar, but didn't prep too much about like what my intentions were. So it's always kind of surprising to have it alchemically come up, be like, oh yeah, and this and this. So I appreciate that you can roll like that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Same here. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you did, like, share, and subscribe. And we appreciate it. Christa of Practical Astros and Mandi of Ecstatic Astrology. And we appreciate every one of you. Please leave a comment and ask questions and talk to us.
Yep. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.